she had learned, somewhere in the space between raising children and burying a husband, that time moved differently when you stopped trying to control it. Helen Porter was 79 years old, and for the past 11 years, she had lived by the clock in a way she never had before. Not obsessively, she wasn't one of those people who scheduled every minute, but intentionally. She woke at 6:30, coffee by 7, breakfast at 7:15, a walk around the neighborhood at 8, weather permitting. The rest of her day unfolded in similar measured intervals, each activity given its designated time, each hour accounted for. Her daughter Linda found this amusing. "Mom, you're retired. You don't have to live on a schedule anymore." But Helen knew something Linda didn't understand yet. Structure wasn't about obligation, it was about freedom. When you knew what the next hour held, you didn't waste it worrying about what you should be doing. You just did it. This particular Tuesday morning in mid-September, Helen sat at her kitchen table in her small bungalow in suburban Minneapolis, drinking her coffee at precisely 7:03. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's sprinkler system clicking through its cycle. Through the window, she could see the maple tree in her front yard just beginning to turn, the edges of its leaves touched with yellow that would spread and deepen over the coming weeks. Her phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Can you watch Ethan today? Emergency at work. I know it's last minute." Helen looked at her calendar, a physical one, paper and pen, hung on the wall by the refrigerator. Tuesday. She had her walk scheduled, then grocery shopping at 9:30, library book club at 2, dinner preparation at 5. She typed back, "What time?" "I'll drop him off at 8:30, pick up around 6. I'm so sorry, Mom. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent." Helen considered her day. The walk could be adjusted. Grocery shopping could wait until Wednesday. Book club was important, but Ethan was 8 years old now. He could sit quietly with a book for an hour while she attended via video call from home. "That's fine. See you at 8:30. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, and began mentally rearranging her schedule. This was the other thing she'd learned about structure. It needed to be firm enough to provide stability, but flexible enough to accommodate life. Because life, despite your best planning, rarely adhered to anyone's calendar. Ethan arrived with a backpack full of things Linda thought would keep him occupied. Tablets, chargers, snacks, a water bottle, a change of clothes in case of spills. Linda looked frazzled, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her makeup applied too quickly. "Thank you, Mom. Seriously, you're a lifesaver." Linda kissed Ethan on the head. "Be good for Grandma, okay? Listen to what she says." Ethan nodded, barely looking up from the handheld game device he'd already pulled from his backpack. "I'll text you when I'm on my way back." Linda was already heading toward the door. "Love you both." And then she was gone, her car backing out of the driveway with the kind of hurried efficiency that suggested she was already late. Helen looked at her grandson. He sat on the couch, thumbs moving rapidly over the game controls, face illuminated by the small screen. He'd grown over the summer, taller, leaner, losing that little boy softness around his cheeks. 8 years old, 3rd grade. Linda had mentioned he was struggling a bit this year. New teacher, harder curriculum, social dynamics that were becoming more complicated. But Helen didn't know much more than that. Linda's updates were usually brief, delivered between other tasks, summarizing rather than elaborating. And Helen didn't push. She'd learned that too, when to ask questions and when to simply be available. "Ethan," she said gently, "I'm going for my morning walk. Would you like to come with me?" He didn't look up. Can I stay here and play my game? You can, but I think the fresh air would do you good. I don't want to walk. Helen paused. She could insist. She was the grandmother, the adult, the one in charge, but she'd also learned that forced participation rarely led to genuine engagement. All right, I'll be gone about 40 minutes. The house rules are no leaving, no answering the door, no using the stove or oven. If you need anything, call my cell phone. It'll be in my pocket. He nodded, still focused on his screen. Helen put on her walking shoes, tucked her phone into her cardigan pocket, and stepped outside into the September morning. The neighborhood was quiet at 8:45 on a Tuesday. Most people had already left for work or school. The retirees who populated many of the houses on her street were inside, settling into their own routines. Helen walked her usual route, down Maple Avenue, left on Oak Street, around the small park where young mothers sometimes gathered with their toddlers, then back up Elm and home again. She'd been walking this route for 11 years, ever since Richard died. Heart attack, sudden. He'd been 71, still vital, still making plans. They'd been married 48 years. She thought they'd have more time. The walking had started as something to do with the grief, a way to move her body when sitting still made the loss feel unbearable. But it had evolved into something else, a meditation, a ritual, a way of marking time that felt productive without requiring productivity. She thought about Ethan as she walked, about the way he'd barely looked at her, the way his attention had been entirely absorbed by the screen. This was normal for this generation, she knew. Kids these days grew up with technology in a way her own children hadn't. But something about it bothered her. Not the technology itself exactly, more the way it created distance, the way it allowed you to be in a room with someone without actually being present. Helen had noticed this at family gatherings, too. Linda on her phone, checking work emails, Ethan on his tablet watching videos. Even her other daughter, Patricia, who lived in Boston and visited twice a year, spent half her visits responding to texts and scrolling through social media. Everyone was somewhere else, always half engaged, always dividing their attention. She wondered if they noticed, if they felt the loss of full presence the way she did, or if this was simply what connection looked like now, scattered, fragmented, good enough. By the time she returned home, her legs were pleasantly tired and her mind was clearer. She opened the front door to find Ethan exactly where she'd left him, still playing his game. "How was your walk, Grandma?" he'd asked without looking up. That was something. "Lovely. The leaves are starting to turn." "Cool." Helen went to the kitchen and began preparing a snack. Apple slices with peanut butter, something she remembered Ethan liking when he was younger. She arranged them on a plate and brought them to the coffee table. "I'm not hungry." "That's fine. They'll be here when you are." She sat in the armchair across from him and picked up her book, a mystery novel from the library, halfway finished. She'd planned to read for an hour this morning anyway. The location had changed, but the activity remained the same. They sat together in silence, Ethan playing his game, Helen reading her book. The clock on the wall ticked steadily forward. An hour passed, then another. Ethan occasionally shifted positions, stretching his legs or adjusting his grip on the game device. Helen turned pages, occasionally glancing up to check on him. The apple slices sat untouched. At 11:15, Ethan spoke. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Can I watch TV?" "You can, but I'm curious. What have you been doing on your game for the past 2.5 hours? He shrugged. "Playing?" "What kind of game is it?" "Just a game. You wouldn't understand." Helen set down her book. "Try me." He looked skeptical, but shifted so she could see the screen. The graphics were colorful, fast-moving. Characters jumped and collected coins and battled small creatures. It looked chaotic to Helen's eyes, but she could see the appeal, the immediate feedback, the constant stimulation, the clear goals and rewards. "It looks complicated," she said. "It's not really. You just have to know the patterns. How long have you been playing this particular game?" Another shrug. "I don't know. A few weeks, maybe." "Do you enjoy it?" He paused. The question seemed to surprise him. "I guess. Yeah, it's fine." "Just fine?" "I don't know. It's something to do." He looked at her with an expression that was hard to read, not quite defensive, but close. "Why are you asking so many questions?" "Because I'm interested in what you're interested in." "You're interested in video games?" "I'm interested in you." He didn't know what to do with that. He looked back at his screen, but his thumbs had stilled. The game continued playing without him for a moment before pausing automatically. "Mom says I play too much. She says I need to do other things, but there's nothing else to do." "Nothing else?" There's stuff, but it's boring." "What kind of stuff?" "I don't know. Homework, chores. She wants me to join soccer, but I don't like soccer. All the other kids are better than me." Helen heard something beneath the words, not just boredom, something closer to resignation or maybe loneliness. "What do you like?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "If you could do anything right now, anything at all, what would you choose?" He thought about it, really thought about it, his face scrunching in concentration. "I don't know," he said finally. "I guess I've never really thought about it." Helen had raised 2 daughters, Linda and Patricia, both successful, both married, both living lives that looked good from the outside, but she remembered when they were young, when their interests were still forming, when they had hours of unstructured time to fill with imagination and curiosity. Linda had loved building things, blocks, Legos, elaborate pillow forts that took over entire rooms. She'd spend hours constructing, destroying, reconstructing. Helen would find her daughter sitting in the middle of some architectural disaster, already planning the next iteration. Patricia had been different, more internal. She loved stories, would listen to the same books read aloud dozens of times, then act them out with stuffed animals, creating elaborate narratives that could span days. Both girls had been bored sometimes, of course they had, but their boredom led to creation, to exploration, to the kind of play that built skills they'd carry into adulthood. Ethan's boredom seemed different. It didn't lead anywhere. It just sat there, filled temporarily by screens, never quite satisfied, but never quite empty enough to demand something more. Helen wondered when that shift had happened, when boredom had stopped being a creative force and started being something to avoid at all costs. "Would you like to help me with something?" she asked. He looked suspicious. "Like what?" "I'm baking bread this afternoon. I do it every Tuesday. It takes a few hours, but most of that is just waiting. You could help with the mixing and kneading." "I don't know how to make bread." "I didn't either until someone taught me. My grandmother showed me when I was about your age." "Is it hard?" "Parts of it are, but it's also satisfying. You get to see something change. Flour and water and yeast become something completely different." He considered this. "Will it take a long time?" "The active work is maybe 30 minutes. The rest is just patience." "What do I do while we're waiting?" "Whatever you'd like. You can go back to your game if you want, or we could find something else." Ethan looked at his game device, then at Helen. Something was shifting in his expression, not quite interest, but maybe openness, a willingness to try. "Okay," he said, "I'll help." They stood together in Helen's kitchen, Ethan on a step stool so he could reach the counter comfortably. Helen had learned to bake bread as a child, taught by her grandmother in a farmhouse kitchen in rural Wisconsin. She'd carried the skill through her life, through marriage, through raising children, through Richard's death and the quiet years that followed. Bread was simple: flour, water, yeast, salt. But it required attention. It required patience. It required you to be present for each step, to notice how the dough felt, to adjust based on texture and temperature and intuition. She showed Ethan how to measure the ingredients, how to mix them until they came together in a shaggy mass, how to turn the dough onto the counter and begin kneading, pressing with the heels of his hands, folding, turning, pressing again. "It's sticky," he said, making a face. "It is at first. Keep going. It'll change." He worked the dough, awkward at first, then finding a rhythm. Helen worked beside him, her own hands moving through the familiar motions. They kneaded in silence, the only sounds the soft thud of dough against counter and the ticking of the kitchen clock. After 10 minutes, Ethan's dough had transformed, smoother now, more elastic, the stickiness mostly gone. "See," Helen said, "you did that. You changed it." He looked at the dough with something like wonder. "It's different." Everything changes when you pay attention to it. They shaped the dough into balls and placed them in greased bowls. Helen covered them with clean dish towels. "Now what?" Ethan asked. "Now we wait. The yeast needs time to work. The dough needs to rise. We'll check on it in about 90 minutes. "That's a long time." "It is, but some things can't be rushed." Helen washed her hands and started cleaning the counter. Ethan helped, wiping flour into the sink, rinsing the measuring cups. When they finished, he stood there uncertainly, like he'd forgotten what to do with himself without a screen in his hands. "Would you like to see something?" Helen asked. "What?" "Come with me." She led him to the spare bedroom, the one that had been Patricia's before she left for college, then had been a guest room, and now served as Helen's quiet space. The room held a desk, a comfortable chair, and built-in bookshelves that lined 2 walls. But what Helen wanted to show Ethan was the closet. She opened it to reveal shelves stacked with photo albums, dozens of them, organized by year, each spine labeled in Helen's neat handwriting. "These are our family photos, every important moment, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday, all here." Ethan looked at the albums with mild interest. "Why don't you just keep them on your phone?" "I do have some on my phone, but I like having physical albums too. There's something about holding a photograph, about turning pages, about seeing your life laid out in a way that's tactile and real." She pulled down an album from the middle shelf. "This one is from the year your mom was 8, same age you are now." They sat on the floor, the album between them. Helen opened it to reveal photos from 1990. Linda at 8, gap-toothed and freckled, holding a soccer trophy. Linda at the lake, mid-jump off the dock. Linda at the kitchen table, helping with Thanksgiving dinner. Linda in the backyard, building an elaborate fort out of cardboard boxes. "Mom played soccer?" Ethan sounded surprised. "For 3 years, she was quite good." "She never told me that." "Maybe she forgot, or maybe it didn't seem important." Helen turned the page. "People don't always remember what defined them as children. The details fade, the feelings remain, but the specifics blur." They looked through the album together. Helen narrated some photos, let others speak for themselves. There was Linda at Christmas, buried under wrapping paper. Linda at her grandmother's house, helping with Thanksgiving dinner. Linda in the backyard, building an elaborate fort out of cardboard boxes. "She looks happy," Ethan said. "She was, Most of the time, she had hard days too. Everyone does. Did she play video games? We didn't have many video games then. We had a Nintendo that the girls shared. They played it sometimes, but not for hours like kids do now. There wasn't much to do on it. What did she do instead? Lots of things. She read, she played outside, she built things. She helped me in the kitchen sometimes too, though not as much as I would have liked. Helen smiled at the memory. She was always in motion, always starting projects she didn't quite finish. Ethan looked at the photos for a long moment. Do you have pictures of me when I was little? I do. Want to see? She pulled down a more recent album. Ethan as a baby, red-faced and wrinkled. Ethan as a toddler, covered in birthday cake. Ethan at 5, missing his front teeth, laughing at something just outside the frame. He studied the photos with an intensity Helen recognized, the way children looked at their younger selves, trying to remember being that person, trying to connect who they were then with who they are now. I don't remember a lot of this stuff, he said. That's normal. Memory is strange. We remember feelings more than facts, impressions more than details. What do you remember about being 8? Helen thought about it. Memories from 70 years ago, somehow still vivid. I remember helping my grandmother bake bread. I remember the way her kitchen smelled, yeast and cinnamon and something else I could never quite name. I remember feeling useful, like I was learning something important. Is that why you still bake bread? Because of your grandma? Partly, but also because I love it. The process, the patience it requires, the way it makes the house smell, the way it tastes when it's fresh from the oven. She paused. And because it connects me to her. She's been gone for 40 years, but when I'm kneading dough, I can still feel her hands guiding mine. Ethan was quiet, absorbing this. Then, do you think I'll remember today, when I'm old like you? Helen smiled. I don't know, but I hope so. They checked on the bread dough at 1:30. It had risen beautifully, doubled in size, pressing against the towels. Helen showed Ethan how to punch it down, his favorite part, the satisfying thump of fist into dough, the air escaping in a soft sigh. They shaped the dough into loaves and placed them in pans for the second rise. Another hour of waiting. I'm hungry, Ethan said. Me too. Should we make lunch? They made sandwiches together. Helen had turkey and cheese, lettuce, tomato. Ethan had peanut butter and jelly, cut into triangles the way he'd apparently preferred since he was 3. They ate at the kitchen table, the September sun streaming through the window, warm but not hot. Grandma, Ethan said between bites. Yes? Why does time feel different at your house? What do you mean? I don't know, it feels slower, but not in a bad way, like there's more time to do stuff. Helen considered how to answer this. I think when you're not rushing, time expands. When you give each moment room to breathe, it feels bigger. Is that why you have a schedule for everything? Partly. The schedule helps me not waste time worrying about what I should be doing. I know what comes next, so I can be fully present for what's happening now. But don't you get bored doing the same things every day? Sometimes, but I've learned that routine isn't the opposite of adventure, it's the foundation for it. When the basic rhythms of your life are steady, you have energy for the unexpected things. He thought about this, chewing slowly. I think I'm bored a lot, even when I'm doing stuff. What do you think that means? I don't know. Maybe that the stuff I'm doing isn't very interesting. Or maybe, Helen said gently, that you're not fully engaged with it. When your attention is divided, part of you playing a game, part of you thinking about something else, nothing feels satisfying. How do you get fully engaged? You practice. You notice when your mind wanders and you bring it back. You choose activities that require your full attention. You give yourself permission to be bored sometimes, because boredom is where creativity lives. Ethan looked skeptical. That sounds hard. It is at first, but like kneading bread, it gets easier with practice. At 2:30, they put the bread in the oven. The house filled with that particular smell, yeast and wheat and warmth. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, drawing on paper Helen had given him. She'd suggested he draw whatever he wanted, and after some initial hesitation, he'd started sketching what looked like a fort or castle. He worked with surprising focus, adding details, erasing, and redrawing, completely absorbed. Helen sat nearby with her book club discussion notes. The group was reading a novel about family dysfunction and forgiveness, heavy themes, but handled with grace. She'd planned to join the video call from home, and at 4:45, she opened her laptop and signed in. The other members appeared in their small rectangles, 6 women, all around Helen's age, all scattered across different parts of Minneapolis. They greeted each other warmly, asked after health and family, then dove into discussion. Ethan looked up from his drawing occasionally, listening to the women talk about the book, about the characters' choices, about whether forgiveness was always possible or always necessary, about their own experiences with family conflict and resolution. He didn't say anything, just listened while his hand continued moving across the paper. The discussion lasted an hour. When it ended, Helen closed her laptop and found Ethan watching her. "Was that fun?" he asked. "It was. I enjoy talking about books with people who've read the same ones. We all notice different things. It makes the story richer." "Do you always do it on the computer?" "We used to meet in person, but after COVID, we switched to video calls. Some people prefer it this way. No driving, no need to host, easier to fit into busy schedules. But I miss being in the same room. You lose something when you're only seeing people through screens." "Like what?" "Presence. The energy of people in a shared space. The way conversations flow differently when you can see everyone's full body language, not just their faces in little boxes." She paused. "But it's better than not meeting at all." Ethan nodded slowly. "I do video calls with my friends sometimes to play games together, but we're not really together. We're just next to each other online." "Does that bother you?" "Sometimes. I don't know." He looked down at his drawing. "I guess I don't think about it much." I suspect he thinks about it more than he realizes, that this vague dissatisfaction he feels, the boredom, the restlessness, is partly about this, about being constantly connected but rarely present, about having hundreds of virtual interactions that never quite satisfied the need for genuine human contact. But she didn't say any of this. She just waited, giving him space to arrive at his own conclusions. The bread finished baking at 3:40. They pulled it from the oven, golden brown and crusty, and let it cool on wire racks. The smell was intoxicating. Ethan kept circling back to look at it, clearly proud of what they'd made. "Can we eat it?" he asked. "We should let it cool for about 10 minutes, then yes." When the time came, Helen sliced the bread carefully. Steam rose from the interior, soft and pale. She buttered 2 slices and handed one to Ethan. He took a bite and his eyes widened. "This is really good." "It is, isn't it? Fresh bread is one of life's great pleasures." They ate their bread standing in the kitchen, savoring it. When they finished, Ethan said, "Can we make bread again, the next time I come over?" "Absolutely. I bake every Tuesday. You're welcome to join me anytime." "What do you do the other days?" Different things. Wednesdays, I volunteer at the library. Thursdays, I have coffee with some friends. Fridays, I do my deep cleaning. Saturdays are for whatever needs doing. Errands, gardening, projects around the house. What about Sundays? Sundays are my rest day. I go to church in the morning, then I read or take a long walk, or sometimes I just sit in my backyard and watch the birds. Nothing scheduled, just being. That sounds nice. It is. Everyone needs at least one day where they don't have to be productive. Ethan looked thoughtful. I don't think I have a day like that. There's always something. School, homework, activities Mom wants me to do, stuff I'm supposed to be doing. That sounds exhausting. It kind of is. Helen wondered if Linda realized this, if she saw how her son was struggling under the weight of constant scheduling, constant stimulation, constant expectations, or if she was too busy with her own overwhelming life to notice. "Do you ever tell your mom how you feel?" Helen asked. "Sometimes, but she's always stressed. I don't want to make it worse." Telling her how you feel isn't making it worse, it's giving her information she needs. But what if she gets mad? She might. People sometimes respond to truth with defensiveness, especially when they're already overwhelmed. But that doesn't mean the truth shouldn't be spoken. Ethan considered this. "Will you tell her?" "No, this is between you and your mom, but I can help you figure out how to say it if you'd like." "Maybe. I don't know." He looked at the clock. "What time is Mom coming?" "Around 6. We have a couple hours still." "What should we do?" Helen looked at him, this 8-year-old boy who'd spent most of the day slowly shifting from screen-absorbed to actually present, who'd helped make bread and looked at old photos and drawn a surprisingly detailed castle, and now was asking her how to fill time instead of defaulting to a device. "What would you like to do?" she asked. He thought about it, really thought about it. "Could we look at more pictures? I want to see more of when Mom was little." "I'd love that." They spent the next hour in the spare room going through albums. Helen narrated her daughter's childhoods, the vacations to northern Minnesota lakes, the school plays, the ordinary moments that had seemed unremarkable at the time, but now felt precious. Ethan asked questions. What was Mom like at his age? Did she get in trouble? What were her favorite things? What made her sad? Helen answered honestly. Linda had been energetic, sometimes stubborn, often generous. She'd struggled with reading in 2nd grade. She'd loved animals, but been afraid of dogs until she was 10. She'd fought with her sister constantly until they were teenagers. Then suddenly they'd become close. "People change," Helen said. "Your mom is different now than she was at 8, different than she was at 18 or 28. We're always becoming new versions of ourselves." "Do you think I'll change?" "I know you will. The question is how. What kind of person do you want to become?" Ethan looked at the picture album in his lap, a picture of Linda at 9, building a snowman, face red from cold, smiling huge. "I want to be happy, like she looks here." "That's a good goal. Do you know what makes you happy?" "Not really. I mean, games are fun, but not like happy, just something to do." "What about today? Was any of today happy?" He thought about it. "Yeah, the bread was fun, and looking at pictures and talking to you." "Why do you think that was?" "I don't know. Maybe because I wasn't thinking about other stuff. I was just here." Helen felt something settle in her chest. Understanding, connection, the sense that she'd reached him somehow, had offered him a glimpse of something he'd been missing without knowing it. That's presence. That's what it feels like to be fully engaged with your life instead of just passing through it. I want more of that. Then you'll have to practice. It won't always be easy. The world is designed to keep you distracted, but if you practice choosing presence, choosing to be where you are instead of where you might be, it gets easier. Will you help me? Of course, anytime you want. Linda arrived at 6:07, apologizing for being late. She looked exhausted but relieved. "Thank you so much, Mom. Work was a disaster. I can't even—" She stopped, noticing the bread cooling on the counter. "Did you bake?" "Ethan and I made bread together." "We made it from scratch," Ethan added, a note of pride in his voice. "I did all the kneading." Linda looked at her son, then at Helen, something shifting in her expression. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. How was the rest of your day?" "Good. Grandma showed me pictures of when you were little. Did you know you used to play soccer?" Yes, I did." Linda smiled, but it was strained. "I'd forgotten about that." "You were really good. Grandma showed me your trophies." "She did." "Can I show Mom my drawing, Grandma?" "Of course." Ethan ran to get his castle drawing from the kitchen table. Linda watched him go, then turned to Helen. "What happened today?" she asked quietly. "He seems different." "We spent time together, real time, paid attention to each other." "I pay attention to him." "I know you do, but attention while you're doing 3 other things isn't the same as full presence." Linda's face tightened. "I'm doing the best I can, Mom. I'm working full-time, managing a household, trying to keep everything together. I can't just spend hours baking bread on a Tuesday." "I know. I'm not criticizing you. It feels like you are." Helen took a breath. This was delicate territory. The line between offering wisdom and seeming judgmental was thin, and she'd learned over the years that people were most defensive when they suspected you might be right. "Linda," she said gently, "you're an excellent mother. Ethan is a good kid because you've raised him well. But he's struggling with something, and I think it's the same thing many kids his age are struggling with. Too much stimulation, not enough genuine connection." "He has connection. He has friends, activities, school." "He has busyness. That's not the same thing." Linda looked like she wanted to argue, but Ethan returned with his drawing before she could respond. He showed it to her with shy pride, and Linda's expression softened as she looked at it. "This is beautiful, honey. You made this today?" "Yeah. Grandma gave me paper and I just started drawing. I didn't even know what it was going to be at first." "I'm impressed." Linda looked at Helen over Ethan's head, something complicated in her eyes. "We should get going. It's a school night." They gathered Ethan's things. Linda thanked Helen again. Ethan hugged her, a real hug, not the perfunctory kind, and whispered, "Thanks, Grandma. Today was really good." "You're welcome, sweetheart. Come back anytime." She watched them leave, Linda's car backing out of the driveway just as it had that morning. But something was different now. Something had shifted, though Helen wasn't sure exactly what. She cleaned up the kitchen, put the extra bread in containers, wiped down the counters. Outside, the light was fading, the September evening settling into that particular quality of early autumn, still warm, but with a promise of cold to come. She thought about Ethan, about the way he'd engaged with the bread making, with the photos, with the simple act of being present, about his admission that he wanted more of that feeling but didn't know how to create it. She thought about Linda, about how hard her daughter was working, how much she was carrying, how little space she had for reflection or rest, about how easy it was to get caught in the trap of constant motion, constant productivity, never stopping enough to ask whether all this activity was actually serving anyone. And she thought about herself, about the structure she'd built into her life after Richard died, how it had saved her from the shapelessness of grief, how it had given her days meaning even when meaning felt elusive. but also about how that structure had become her way of being present, of marking time not by letting it pass, but by filling it intentionally, by choosing each hour's purpose and giving it her full attention. That's what she tried to show Ethan today, not how to follow a schedule, but how to inhabit time instead of just enduring it. Linda called 2 days later. "Mom, can we talk?" "Of course." There was a pause. Helen could hear Linda breathing, gathering courage for something. "Ethan hasn't stopped talking about Tuesday, about making bread and looking at photos and spending time with you, and it made me realize something." Another pause. "I don't remember the last time I spent time like that with him. Real time, where we weren't rushing to the next thing or multitasking or half distracted." "You are very busy," Helen said gently. "I am, but that's not an excuse. I'm choosing to be this busy. I'm choosing to pack our schedules full. And I'm starting to wonder if I'm choosing wrong." "What do you want to be different?" "I don't know. Everything? Nothing? I can't quit my job. I can't eliminate all our responsibilities, but I can't keep going like this. Ethan's struggling at school. I'm exhausted all the time. My marriage." She stopped. "Paul and I barely talk anymore. We just manage logistics." I remember this phase of life, the overwhelm of it, the sense that you were drowning in obligations while somehow also feeling like you weren't doing enough. "Can I tell you something?" Helen asked. "Please. When you and Patricia were young, I struggled with this too. Your father worked long hours. I was home with you girls, which was what I wanted, but I was also exhausted and lonely and felt like I was failing at everything. One day, my mother came to visit and found me crying in the kitchen. The house was a mess. You girls were watching too much TV. Dinner was going to be frozen pizza for the 3rd week in a row." "What did Grandma say?" "She asked me what I was trying to prove, and I didn't understand the question at first, but she explained. I was trying to prove I could handle everything, that I was a good mother, that I deserved the life I had. And in trying to prove all that, I was making myself miserable and missing what actually mattered." "What did you do?" "I stopped trying to do everything. I let some things go. I asked for help. I learned to be okay with good enough instead of perfect. And most importantly, I started protecting time for what mattered. Real time with you girls, real time with your father, real time for myself." Linda was quiet for a long moment. "How do I do that? How do I figure out what to let go of?" "You start by asking what you want to remember when you're my age. When Ethan is grown and you're looking back at these years, what do you want to have chosen?" "I want to remember being present, being with him. Not perfectly, I know that's impossible, but genuinely. I want him to remember that I saw him." "Then that's what you protect. Everything else negotiates around that." It sounds simple when you say it. It's simple, but not easy. You'll mess up, you'll slide back into old patterns, but every day gives you another chance to choose differently. "Will you help me like you helped Ethan?" "How?" "I don't know. Maybe, could we do a standing thing? Like once a week I drop Ethan off and you two spend time together. He loved it so much, and maybe it would help him, help both of us." Helen felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'd love that." "Yeah?" "Every Tuesday, we'll make it a tradition. Bread and presents and whatever else the afternoon holds." Linda laughed, watery but real. "Thank you, Mom, for showing me what I was missing, for showing Ethan, for being patient with us. You're my daughter. Patience isn't a burden. It's a gift I get to give." The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Every Tuesday at 8:30, Linda would drop Ethan off. Helen would adjust her schedule to accommodate him. The walk became a shared activity. Grocery shopping happened with a helper. Book club meetings included a quiet child with a drawing pad. They baked bread together, made cookies, prepared dinners from scratch. The cooking became a meditation for both of them, the measuring, the mixing, the transformation of separate ingredients into something cohesive and whole. But they did other things too. They went to the library and checked out books Ethan chose himself. They visited the park and fed the ducks. They sat in Helen's backyard and watched birds at the feeder, learning to identify species by sight and sound. They talked about school and friends and things Ethan worried about history and science and why the world worked the way it did, about feelings and fears and hopes. Helen noticed his change week by week. He still played games sometimes. She wasn't trying to eliminate technology from his life, but he also drew and read and engaged with the world around him. His attention span lengthened, his questions deepened, his restlessness eased. And Linda changed too. She started setting boundaries at work, left on time twice a week, protecting evenings for family dinner, put her phone away during meals, scheduled one weekend afternoon each week for unstructured family time. No plans, no agenda, just being together. "It's hard," Helen told her daughter one Tuesday when she picked up Ethan. "Letting go of control, trusting that everything won't fall apart if I'm not managing every detail. But it's such a relief. I didn't realize how heavy all that was until I put some of it down." Helen hugged her daughter. "I'm proud of you." For what? For choosing, for being willing to change, for recognizing what matters. I learned from the best. November arrived. The trees lost their leaves completely, standing bare against gray skies. The air turned cold, requiring jackets and gloves. The light faded earlier each day, that gradual dimming toward winter. On the third Tuesday of November, Ethan arrived upset. Linda apologized. He'd had a bad morning, some conflict with a friend at school, and left quickly, her own stress visible in her shoulders and face. Helen brought Ethan inside and started their bread making without comment. He was quiet, mechanically going through the motions, but his usual focus was absent. When the dough was rising, Helen said, "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Okay, want to sit quietly together?" "I guess so." They sat in the living room. Helen picked up her book. Ethan stared at his hands. After 15 minutes, he said, "My friend said I was boring." Helen set down her book. "Why did he say that?" "Because I didn't want to play the game everyone was playing at recess. I wanted to read instead, and he said reading was boring and I was boring for liking it." "How did that make you feel?" "Mad and sad, because he's my friend, or I thought he was. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am boring." "Do you think you're boring?" "I don't know. I like different stuff than the other kids now. They all want to play games or talk about shows I don't watch, and I want to do other things. But maybe that means something is wrong with me." Helen recognized this moment, the collision between who you're becoming and who others expect you to be. She lived through it more times than she could count. "Ethan, can I tell you something I've learned?" "Okay." Being different from other people doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means you're becoming yourself, and that's always uncomfortable because it means leaving behind some of what used to define you. "But I don't want to be alone." "You won't be, but you might need to find different friends, people who appreciate who you're becoming instead of wanting you to stay who you were." "What if I can't find people like that?" "You will. But it takes time, and in the meantime, you have to decide whether you want to pretend to be someone you're not to keep friends who don't really see you, or whether you want to be yourself and trust that the right people will find you." Ethan thought about this. "That's really hard." "It is. It's one of the hardest things about being human, but I believe you can do it." "How do you know?" "Because you've already been doing it. Since you started coming here on Tuesdays, you've been choosing presence over distraction, depth over surface, real connection over easy entertainment. Those aren't easy choices, but you've been making them anyway. It doesn't feel like I'm choosing, it just feels like I'm being me. That's exactly right. That's what authentic choice feels like. Not forced, not calculated, just aligned with who you actually are. He nodded slowly, processing. Grandma? Yes? Thank you for helping me figure stuff out. You're figuring it out yourself. I'm just providing a space where you can do it. Well, thank you for that then. Helen smiled. You're very welcome. Christmas approached. Linda asked if Helen wanted to host Christmas dinner this year. I know it's your house and your time, Linda said, but I thought maybe we could make it a slower kind of Christmas, less rushing, less stuff, more just being together. Helen agreed. She loved hosting, loved the preparation, the cooking, the gathering of family around her table. Patricia flew in from Boston with her husband. They'd never had children, a choice that had caused some family tension years ago, but everyone had eventually accepted. They brought wine and stories about their lives in Boston, about work and friends, and the strange parallel universe of East Coast city living. Christmas morning was quiet. Fewer presents than in previous years, but more thought behind each one. Ethan gave Helen a drawing he'd made, her house in winter, smoke rising from the chimney, light glowing in the windows. She framed it immediately. Dinner was a production. Helen had prepared for days: turkey and stuffing, mashed potatoes, 3 kinds of vegetables, rolls, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. Everyone helped. Linda and Patricia worked together in the kitchen with surprising harmony, decades of sister conflict apparently softened by distance and time. Paul carved the turkey. Ethan set the table with serious concentration. They sat down together at 3 o'clock. Helen looked around her table, her daughters and their husbands, her grandson, all present, all here, all engaged with this moment instead of half somewhere else. Linda raised her glass. To Mom, for teaching us what matters, for being patient while we figured it out, for showing us that time is a gift when you know how to use it. They toasted. Helen felt tears prick her eyes, but didn't try to hide them. They ate slowly, talked, laughed, told stories. The meal lasted for 2 hours and no one rushed. When it was over, they cleaned up together, then moved to the living room for coffee and pie. Ethan fell asleep on the couch, full and content. Linda covered him with an afghan Helen had crocheted decades ago. Patricia and her husband played cards with Paul at the kitchen table. Linda sat with Helen by the window, watching snow begin to fall. This is what I wanted, Linda said quietly. This feeling, this slowness, this presence. You created it. You made the choices that allowed it. With your help. Maybe, but you did the hard work. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the snow accumulate on the bare branches of the maple tree. The years would continue. Helen knew that. She'd watch Ethan grow from 8 to 18, would see him navigate adolescence with its particular pains and joys. She'd watch Linda continue to balance work and family, success and presence, would see her daughter make choices both wise and foolish and learn from both. She'd watch Patricia maybe soften toward the idea of children, or maybe not. Would see her own body continue to age, would face the inevitable losses that came with time, friends, mobility, eventually her independence. But all of that was future. Right now, she was here, in her house with its good bones, at Christmas with her family, present and engaged and alive in this moment that would never come again. She'd learned somewhere between raising children and burying a husband that time moved differently when you stopped trying to control it, when you gave it structure but also spaciousness, when you measured it not in hours completed but in moments inhabited. The clock on the wall ticked forward. The snow fell steady. Her family filled her house with the warm chaos of connection. And Helen Porter, 79 years old, sat in her chair by the window and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Not perfect, never perfect, but present, intentional, and full. And that, she'd learned, was more than enough.